Hello, and thank you for attending this webinar presented by the ACA Gurus. And today we're going to be talking about how to avoid IRSEN and what is that? Brought to you again by the ACA Gurus, and I'll be presenting today. My name is 𝘀𝗂𝗿𝗏, and let's get started. So, what is IRSEN? Well, IRSEN is an IRS error notification. We use the term IRSEN internally here at the AC Gurus, and we hope to make it mainstream because it's just a lot shorter than writing down IRS error notification each time. So, as I said, it's a notification that the IRS bounces back when the employee information does not match the IRS's databases, namely Social Security number, first name, middle name or initial, and or last name. Okay, so when you receive one of those, what do, right? Well, it has to be addressed right away. The problem is that many ACA providers do not get those back on behalf of their employers or their clients, so the client never knows. Here at the ACA Gurus, we do receive them, and we let you know if you received one, and we'll help you to try to correct these. So because if those errors linger, you might get penalized later on. But in addition to that, the problem is that because you've been submitting incorrect information, and not only for the ACA, but for other reasons to the IRS, when the employee retires and needs to access their benefits, they might have difficulties doing that. Okay, they might not be able to get them, or be delays, so that could be a problem. In addition to that is that when you get the IRSEN, the IRS does not indicate where the error is. It's just saying, hey, there's an error here in this form, correct it, find out what it is, and submit a correction. And yeah, they're not that helpful, but here at the ACA Gurus, we're pretty versed on that, so we should be able to actually help you out to determine where the error is, and then try to correct it. So this is because the IRS says, or the guidelines, the ACA guidelines, the IRS guidelines, says that you need to report correct forms. Okay, so if you don't submit correct forms and you get IRSEN, you need to correct it. Otherwise, even if you filed a form, it will not be considered corrected, and you'll start to be penalized based on being late because you haven't yet filed a correct form. It's a correct 1095-C or B. So those accumulate on a time basis, but it maxes out after August 1st. In other words, you want to get those corrections done right away because you don't want those penalties to increase. And well, what the increasing intervals after 30 days, right now the deadline to e-file your 1085s is March 31st, but it might change. So they give you 30 days after the deadline, and then another 60 days. But then after August 1st, the penalty maxes out at around $400 per form. Okay, and that can add up. Okay, if you have a lot of forms that have issues, it's in your best interest to correct them right away. Now, as I mentioned, even if the form is corrected, but you submitted a correction late, you still might be penalized for submitting the correct form late. Again, maxed out at $400 after August 1st. But again, if you do it pretty quickly, we have seen that the IRS doesn't even send out a penalty letter, and if they had, it's easily explained, hey, we submitted it a few days later, I'm sorry, please take the penalty away, and they do. It's not a big problem. The issue comes after, if you wait all the way to after August or many months after, and then it's a little bit more difficult to correct that, to get those penalties off. So you would say, okay, but why did I get an IRSEN. What happened? If I use the name in the Social Security card, well, it's unfortunately the different federal, state, county, municipal agencies, schools, whatever you want to call it, they each have their own databases and their own their own systems, right? Their own ID cards, and each one fills them up differently. Okay, so sometimes they share them, like the Social Security Administration. We'll see that in a moment. Supposedly, the IRS pulls information from the Social Security Administration, but each state might not. They'll have their own databases, and they don't match it with the Social Security Administration, so then you have issues there. So typically, you as an employer will look at the Social Security card, and I'll show you in a moment why that is not always will not always match the IRS's databases. And here we put, IRS is not the same information as the Social Security Administration, as 𝘂𝗶𝗸𝗏, driver's license, and so on. Now, for example, the IRS is supposedly pulls the information from the Social Security Administration, and they do this in intervals. And sometimes I don't know if they do them really. They might miss something. But the fact of the matter is that in about 3% of all the 1095Cs, and we're doing this for over 10 years, so of all of them, we're talking about tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, about 3% of those, which is, in retrospect, a very good number of them, they trigger IRSENs, they trigger IRS error notifications, and but sometimes these are the accumulative of all our clients. There have been clients that have had IRSENs for hundreds of their clients, for other employees. I'm sorry, and many without even one, meaning that in the first filing it was accepted with no issues, and those are fine. But yeah, it's 3% is a quite high number, but of course, if you do get interested, we can help you out. Now, to add to this issue, as mentioned a moment ago, Social Security numbers do not indicate the names if the names are first name, a middle name, or a last name. They're just plainly written them one after the other, and this can cause some confusion. In this example, we see a name. This is just a made-up name, so any coincidence is just that coincidence. Carlos Fermin Mendez. So Fermin, as the name is written on the Social Security number, might be a middle name, or can be part of either a full name, a first name, which is Carlos Fermin, or a composed last name, which would be Fermin Mendez. It's just that the Social Security number card does not tell you. So that brings up to brings that confusion that if you use the Social Security card to take the name, it still might not match the IRS's, even if the names are actually the ones that the IRS has it prior to their placement, especially that middle name, might make the name not match. So you have to be careful. Now, other mismatching causes. Okay, so if the name contains an invalid character, the IRS only accepts the English letters and a hyphen in individuals' names, meaning that any accent, any apostrophes, any commas, after a name but before junior, for example, any periods, are not going to be accepted. So you need to be sure that the employee names do not contain any of these special characters or any of these accents or foreign letters, just English letters and or the hyphen. Now, it gets a little more complicated because sometimes some names are written with the name, space, hyphen, space, the second name, and that might also cause issues. And again, typically names will not have any space before and after the hyphen, but we've seen that those kinds of situations happen, so just be careful. Now, another thing is that in many occasions, an employee might be referred to as their nickname. In this case, we put Bob for William, right? And for whatever reason, the nickname is reported instead of the actual legal name, and again, that will not match the IRS's databases. Foreign names used in different fields in different paperwork due to lack of transfer standardization. In other words, when somebody moves to the United States and becomes a citizen and all that, they the way their name is structured in other countries, it doesn't match how it's structured in the United States. For example, in Latin America, most countries have a first name, a let's say a name, and which will be the name. Then they'll have their first name, second name, and then the last name of the father, and then the last name of the mother. Okay, for starters. So here in the United States, it's only first name, middle name, and last name. So they try to plug those things there, and typically the first name will be the same, but then the middle name, okay, we're not using the middle name, or are we? So they sometimes put the middle name as the middle name, but sometimes they put the last name as the father's last name and the mother's last name as the middle name, and all kinds of combinations. So unfortunately, there's no standardization in that process, and each state and federal different documentation, however they fill them, is how they take the name, and unfortunately, those vary from agency to agency, and that causes part of the confusion. Now, something that we've came across over the years is that there's a lot of, not going to say a lot, but quite a few falsified fake Social Security cards. So when you get one of those, typically I don't know where they get them, but they get them. And as an employer, typically what you are supposed to do is to take that card, the Social Security card, and check the 𝘂𝗶𝗸𝗶 system and match it. So the 𝘂𝗶𝗶𝗶 will say, okay, this is a name and this is the Social Security number that should be on the card, and that verifies them. So that's a step that you should take anyway. But we've seen in many cases in which the Social Security card does not match, and it doesn't match, and it doesn't match, and it doesn't match, and it's sometimes, like I said, because it was not because it was fake. Now, another thing that we see quite some times is that many immigrants that not have a legal status yet here in the States want to work. So they have a relative that lends them their Social Security card to get hired. So they get hired with that name, with the other person's Social Security card. Now, the IRS is not going to notice this because a lot of people have two jobs, and that's totally fine. But the problem is going to be that, again, that how you notice is that that employee will say, hey, my name is, I don't know, John Smith, but call me Frank. So that's a huge red flag. So what's going to happen is that they want you to call them Frank because that's her name, the real name, and eventually that might bring problems in terms of putting that information and reporting that information with the IRS, and you just don't want to be part of that. But again, it's very difficult for employers to actually detect these. It's not that you're going to get penalized for this, but it's something you should be on the lookout for if you can detect it. Using an EITIN, which is an individual taxpayer identification number instead of a Social Security number. The EITINs are given to foreigners normally to pay taxes, but does not authorize them to work. Now, what we've seen over the years is that many people, many companies, employers, hire employees using the EITIN, and they submit the taxes and everything, and the IRS just is only concerned about the taxes, so they want to collect them. So they just accept the number and process that under that name, and that's totally fine because they have that person in that name. Now, insurance companies, when you get the medical insurance, are also going to take the EITIN because, okay, they want to insure the person. So they take the number in the database. It's not going to be repeated because it is a legal number, and they're going to insure that person. There's no problem there. However, when you do your ACA, you're going to report that EITIN with that name, and it's going to bounce back because it's not a Social Security number. the IRS will say, well, why are you reporting this on a 1095-C if this person's supposedly not an employee because this person can't work in the United States? So again, that'll be one of the reasons it bounces back. And again, you'll need to figure out, and you'll probably figure out, oh, wow, this person did not submit a Social Security card. They gave me this 18 card, and well, you'll have to figure out what you do, but that's going to be a bounce, and you've got to be careful with that. Incorrectly entering 1099s, individual companies in your payroll system, and again, submitting them incorrectly as an employee. We see this quite a bit. Many companies, just because it makes it a lot easier to make checks or make payments and track expenses, they just include their 1099 vendors in payroll, and don't have a discriminator, something to show that these are 1099s. So the problem with that is that when the 1095-Cs are produced, and they're produced for these employees, these people that are not employees. So those you're going to submit, and well, they're going to bounce back because as a they're not you're not going to have the correct information, because typically 1099s are going to be using a company name or an EIN instead of a Social Security number. Now, if they happen to be using their Social Security number, okay, it might go through, but then you're still misreporting because that person is not an employee, okay? But mainly they'll be using an EIN, and of course the EIN not being a Social Security number is going to bounce back. Now, we've seen that because they produce the 1095s, and we actually check them before we send them out, we question these things. And we've seen names that are supposed to be employees as company ABC as a name, Inc. as a last name, and it just boggles our mind that it's not noticed by other ACA providers that actually submit these, and of course they bounce back as an error, and then have to explain those away. So be careful with that. Then using an incorrect Social Security number for an employee. Now, what happens is that sometimes when the Social Security number is inputted into the system, there's typos, and of course those will match, and typically those are corrected pretty quickly once we get the IRSEN, because you just see the Social Security card, and oh, we missed a number, or we transposed a number, whatever the case may be, and that's easily corrected. Another thing is that sometimes, older systems, what we'll do is that when you entered less digits, for the Social Security number has 9 digits, and you see you enter 8 digits, the system will automatically put a leading 0 on that name. So of course that's not going to match either, and of course you'll need to figure out what happened. Also, having employees with similar names and Social Security numbers. And this has happened more than once. It's not frequent that happens, but we've seen it a handful of times, is that when a family is naturalized as a U.S. citizen at the same time, they get consecutive, or they used to at least, get consecutive Social Security numbers. So if there was a father and a son that have the same name and same last name, there's no differentiation other than the Social Security number that's 1 digit off, right? So sometimes it happens that within the company they transpose those, or say, oh, this might be a mistake, it's a certain person, and then they eliminate one of them and just keep one of the Social Security numbers. So just be careful that when you have a father-son situation that have been naturalized, just be sure that to note that their Social Security numbers may be consecutive, and they're not a repeated entry. Another thing that happens is that employees may change their name, and they may make the change with the Social Security Administration and just leave it at that, which is the correct thing to do. It's perfectly fine, for whatever reason they can change their names. It's typically because of marriage, and but the thing is that the IRS may take their time. Now, from our experience, that's the time frame that the IRS takes to actually pull that information is not consistent. Sometimes we notice that it's taken within a month or so, sometimes a few months, and sometimes it just doesn't happen year after year. They still don't pull the information. There's ways to get around that. One of those is to, if the name change was done and then you get the IRSEN, well, you re-report, resubmit that correction with the individual's previous name, which is most likely to match the IRS's databases because the IRS has not pulled the new information from the Social Security Administration. So that's sometimes an easy fix, but sometimes it's something else, and of course we'll help you dig into that to submit a correction. Another thing that happens is, and this is when you're a non-fully insured plan and you're offering a self-funded plan, for example, and you need to report dependents. Of course, same rules apply. You need to submit the correct name with the correct Social Security number because those might not match either. But it also happens that when a baby is born, and again, there's the option to submit that baby's information, the name of the baby, with their date of birth instead of the Social Security number because the baby might not be assigned one yet. So when it's a dependent and there's a problem with the Social Security number, you can't find the security number, but you do have the date of birth, well, it bounces back and you just use the date of birth when you're fixing it, when you're submitting the correction, and that should take care of the problem. But of course, it's always best to get the Social Security number if possible. But again, with babies, there might be those delays from the Social Security Administration or the IRS pulling that information from the Social Security Administration, or the baby might not just have a Social Security number yet. Another problem that we've seen a lot is transposing the first name with the last name. Again, that happens, as mentioned, when the names are from somebody that gets naturalized, and they submit their names in different orders and different forms and so on. So that causes some confusion. But sometimes it's also just that in putting the information into your system, somebody made a mistake and then transpose the the first name and last name, and of course those are not going to match. So it's just a simple correction of transposing them back. So how do we fix this, right? So okay, well, once you get the IRSEN, of course, like we mentioned, those corrections need to be corrected and refiled with the IRS. Now, the actual filer will need to be authorized to do so by registering with the IRS's FIRE system and learn how to use and even how to format data in XML, which HR departments are not generally trained to do. Now, yes, the IRS now has employers have to submit their forms by e-filing. The new rule, the new law says that it's 10 or more forms that you need to file. Before, the threshold was 250, but now it's just 10. So you need to e-file anyway. Now, for corrections, you need to e-file them. So the problem with that is that a lot of providers, again, might, if they do tell you that there was an IRSEN, they might not still offer the way to correct it, right? Although most do. So that's a problem. Now, that forces employers to hire ACA providers like the ACA gurus, because we are set up for that. Okay, so because it'll be very difficult for an HR person to not be trained in all these things. You know, the information, all those forms are when they're produced, are not submitted as PDFs or anything like that. It's a data stream, an XML data stream. I'm not going to go into the details about that because it's not the purview of this presentation, but believe me, it's code and it has to be submitted through the FIRE system, and then they interpret that, and then they say, oh, this is the data that we need, and these are the 1095C data, and everything matches, whatever the case may be. But have in mind, it's a data stream. It's not PDFs or anything like that. And it's a little bit difficult for HR departments to be suited for that because it's just not what they do. They're not coders, right? So we do that, and again, most ACA providers do, but it's just that we have a little bit more experience with that. Then you'll need to check the data and provide a correction or corrected form. Now, when we say corrected form, it's a corrected data stream, right, that represents the forms. So again, you need to do it as such. And typically well, not typically, but when you submit a corrected form, there'll be a little box or digital box or data stream box that says corrected. And that's, we really don't know if it's important or not. But it seems to us that, especially when there's several corrections, it's best to actually submit it with that little check mark saying corrected, just to be sure that they know there is a corrected form that replaces a previous one. Otherwise, if they receive two that are not marked as corrected, I don't know how they work internally on those things, but we've seen over the years that sometimes they don't replace the previous one, and of course that creates another IRSEN, and then you say, oh, we submitted a correction, but yeah, the corrected thing was not there. So we make sure that that's checked, and so that avoids all kinds of headaches. And once, the forms are corrected, they need to be, like I mentioned, re-e-filed. You cannot mail them back unless you have one. Well, not even, because you need the 10 minimum, the 10 form submission that you now have to do e-file actually encompasses not only your 1095C forms, but any form that you file with the IRS. So W-9, 1099s, well, those add up. So any company, even with very few employees, will be submitting more, so they have to e-file. So if you file a correction and it still doesn't match the IRS's databases, it's going to again bounce back another IRSEN, and the whole new the process will repeat itself. You'll need to go and check again, and so on and so forth. Now, technically, you can continue submitting corrections indefinitely, forever. Now, is that feasible? No, you're not going to be doing that. You have other things to do. So here at the ACA Gurus, just because of the experience we had under different situations, and because we've constantly spoken with industry experts and the IRS itself about these things, there are certain things that circumvent this. In other words, depending on your situation, there's ways to actually protect yourself from penalties, but it's not the purview of this conversation or this presentation. But you can always contact us to learn about that. Now, these safeguards or these ways to circumvent or correct or protect yourselves will depend on, your industry and so on. Because again, certain industry with a lot of rotation, hospitality business, which are very different from manufacturing business, may have, we will suggest different ways of actually trying to address these things, and instead of actually having to look for a ex-employee that doesn't want to talk with you, so you will never get their correct information to submit to the IRS. It's just a fact of life. So, in conclusion, you need to ensure that your employee data is as clean and compliant as possible, and well before you file. Because again, if your data is incorrect now and you wait until the last minute, then the ACA and, end of year payroll is just a nightmare. So you'll be very busy with that, and you don't want to add to your preoccupation at that time having to track down an ex-employee that doesn't want to speak with you anymore. So the sooner you get your data compliant, the better. Okay. Here at the ACA Gurus, when our clients typically sign up early, and that's a great advantage because we start looking at your data throughout the year, and we can catch those things and then tell them, hey, this employee's name doesn't make sense or it's incorrect for the IRS. You need to correct, address it, and the correct it, and they correct all their other systems. So they don't have to deal with that when the IRS from the ACA reporting season starts, which again reduces that stressful time of the year. Now, so yeah, your ACA season should not start by the end of the year or the beginning of next year. It should start ASAP. The sooner the better. If you can start in January, awesome. Many of our clients sign up with us as soon as we invite them, typically around February or March or even May, depending on where they finish their previous year ACA. We tell them, okay, we come on board again, and they sign up again, and we start working with the data. And again, we inform them when we find some weird or strange or incorrect information. And of course, it has to be an expert. A lot of payroll companies offer the ACA service, which is convenient. They have a certain information, but they don't have all the information. So sometimes they produce incorrect codes, or codes that are correct but might not make too much sense. Typically, this is because they generate codes on the 1095-C, but sometimes those codes do not match reality because they don't have all the information. Namely, they don't have the information of, for example, the waiting periods, or they don't have information about why an employee waived, or in other words, why an employee was not having deductions. That could be because they waived, because they were they didn't take the insurance but did not waive, or the employer did not offer coverage on time. There's a whole series of reasons why the deduction will not be there, but unfortunately, payroll companies will not know that typically. So an expert as us, you have the option of us going into your payroll system and also your Ben admin system, having contact with your broker. So we'll put information from 2, 3, or 4 different data from different places, and we actually put it together, figure out stuff, ask you questions, what happened here, what happened there, in order to have the cleanest data possible. But that's apart from the name, but it makes sense to actually have somebody that is as detailed in order to avoid any issues, any penalties down the road. So that is it for today. Thank you very much for attending again. And of course, we're always open to your questions. So please email me directly at sandro@theacgurus.com. You can always call us at 954-866-9911. And you can always visit our website, theacgurus.com, and you can find some more information there, and also use a contact form to contact us. So if you have any questions, please do contact us, and we'll be more than happy to assist. Again, thank you very much, and have a great day.